Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and here in America, that means New Comic Book Day. Wednesday is when new releases are fill the comic book stores, and when people go in and get their pull list and see what's new and abuse the privileges by standing there flipping through stuff they don't intend to buy, and the whole nine yards. And I don't really buy single-issue comic books anymore. Really not at all. I have from time to time, and of course in years past I did religiously. But I find that when I buy single-issue comics, I either get nothing, just a soap bubble that I've forgotten immediately, except I paid the money for it, or I get something that I really like, but that's clearly meant to be a brick in a graphic novel collection that will come out a year from now. And there's nothing that I want to read so bad that I can't wait. And I buy a lot of graphic novels, a lot of hardcover collections of old stuff, a lot of thematic single books. So I tend not to buy single issues, but I went to the comic shop anyway, just to see what I could see. And I found some things I wanted to show you. The first one being Bargain, a remainder graphic novel from years and years ago that I don't have, although I have the individual issues that it collects. It's just they're falling apart because I've read them so many times. This is Marvel Masterworks, Avengers number 15. And this is 9 issues collected. Those are the issues that are the end of Steve Englehart's run on the Avengers that was so smart but so weird, as everything he wrote was weird, and also memorable. I love all of these issues, but there's one particular moment that there are a lot of great moments in here. There are a lot of great stories in here, but there's one story in particular in which our heroes, it's a bit of a long story. Those of you who know comic books, they're the only ones who are going to be watching this video anyway, but the Avengers have one of their signature villains is Kang the Conqueror, who's from the far future, and comes back into the past to fight the Avengers. I don't know why. And as Steve Englehart used to say at conventions and in person, he used to say, well, if I were Kang, and I came back into the past to fight the Avengers and they beat me, and I retreated back to the future, I would come back into the past when I was ready, when I'd recovered and I had all of my new plans. I would come back into the past 1 minute after the Avengers defeated me. So they're exhausted, and I'm fresh as a daisy. And when they defeated me again, I'd come back to that same minute until finally they just collapsed, and I win by default. But Kang was starred in a classic Avengers story that had just ended when this run, these collection of issues picks up, called The Celestial Madonna, in which Kang comes back into the past to wed a woman from the past whose son is rumored to be invincible. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any more sense now than it did 40 years ago when I was reading it and loving it. But in these issues, Kang decides to conquer the 20th century by conquering the 19th century. So he sets up shop in the Old West and is confronted by all of Marvel's Old West heroes, the Cisco Kid, the Two Gun Kid, the Rawhide Kid, all these characters who used to hold their own comic books back when Westerns could sell a comic. And Englehart had the great idea of sending Avengers into the past to confront Kang. Specifically, Hawkeye, the marksman, who's already in the past. Long story, but he's already there, and he's acclimated to the West. And then he is joined by 2 Avengers from the present day. Moondragon, a human woman who has been mutated to have mental abilities, telepathic abilities, and Thor, the god of thunder, who apparently is not worried about any kind of time paradox, since he would have been alive in the 19th century. He and Moondragon travel back into the past to confront Kang. And there's a scene. They enter Kang's palace, which is on the outskirts of town. And Kang confronts them with a monster. He's watching. He's not going to fight them himself. He's not going to bother. He has fought them many times in the past, including during the Celestial Madonna saga, when he confronted Thor and drove him off, just barely. A ceiling collapses and separates them, but Thor is furious with this guy for constantly interfering with the Avengers. But the Avengers go to his palace, and they are confronted by a mutated monster that Kang sicks on them. And the monster makes short work of 3 of the 4 of them. Hawkeye, the Two Gun Kid, and Moondragon are quickly dispatched while Kang is watching on the monitor. And there was a 4th person who entered with them. a man in an overcoat with a beard. And Kang doesn't think anything of him. He looks like just a hobo, so he doesn't think anything of the guy. But this Avengers comic took place during a time when Thor had a secret identity. When if he rammed his hammer onto the ground, it became a walking stick, and he became the mortal surgeon, Dr. Don Blake. And then if Don Blake wrapped his walking stick on the ground, he became Thor again. And Kang doesn't know that. And so he's watching when his creature is taking the worst that Moondragon and Hawkeye and the Two-Gun Kid can dish out and just mopping the floor with him. He's watching. And it's a great scene. It's by George Perez. It's one of his first appearances in a comic book. And he says, the two real Avengers are finished. The masked cowboy is mere moments from his end. And the bearded stranger... Where is the bearded stranger? My scanner doesn't pick him up anywhere. Wait, there's a hole in the far wall. A gaping hole. It can only have been made with someone with extraordinary strength to escape. No, it cannot be. and Dr. Don Blake says, yes, Kang. It is the Mighty Thor. He slams his walking stick on the ground, and it's the Mighty Thor. And Thor says to him, had I not altered my stature, thou wouldst easily have perceived my disguise and taken measures more suited for a god. And he punches Kang, but of course he can't do anything with Kang's force field, and Kang reminds him of that. But surely you haven't forgotten my ever-present force field. Nay, varlet, Thor hath not forgotten. Not at all. He smashes him out of the building. And Kang hits the ground. I remember reading this when it first came out. Kang hits the ground and says he can't actually strike my person, but if he moves my protective field, he moves me. I'm not anchored to the ground. I've been ousted from my citadel. And when he's saying this, Thor is coming to rest right in front of him. And Thor says, as was meant to be, knave. Now, 'neath the open sky, thou and I, hand to hand, shall settle thy fate once and for all. And Thor puts his hammer in his belt, and Perez gives him shadows around his eyes. This Kang has come close to direct confrontation with Thor 4 times in the last 2 years of comic books, of Avengers comic books, and Thor has had enough. He knocks him out of the building, puts his own hammer away, because this is going to be a fight between 2 people. And advances on him, and there's nothing that Kang can do. He can't teleport away. He can't do anything, and also he's a man of pride, so he can't make himself do anything else. So Thor is just basically knocking him all around. He can't hurt him because he's inside a force field. But like the Kang says, he's not anchored to the ground, and Thor is upset. 'Tis true, Kang, that thou art most unlike all others we Avengers have battled, for surely thou art the most tyrannical, both towards others and thyself. Ne'er dost thou recognize an ending to thy lusts, and yet there must be an ending. And he keeps pounding away on Kang's force field. And it doesn't do any good. But Kang is running out of energy. He is from the future, but he is only mortal. He has no superpowers of his own. He has only technology. And the more Thor pounds on his force field, the more energy it takes, until finally it seems to be overloading, and it does. Thor asks him to stop. He says, hold, man, thou dost push thyself too far. But it doesn't matter. It's too late. Kang disintegrates. And the story goes on from there. There are many moving parts in the whole story, and there's a lot of great writing here and elsewhere in this whole collection. But that moment always stood out to me when I was originally reading the Avengers. And my copy of that issue, it's this issue in the middle here, my copy of it is literally falling apart. I've read it so many times. Because that was pure Englehart, pure Steve Englehart, to say, well, enough's enough. Thor's the god of thunder. If he gets you alone, and you can't teleport away, or you won't because you're too proud, he's going to beat you. There's no other way around it. And Marvel had a antipathy during the Stan Lee years for giving flat-out answers like that, for making things black and white like that. Kang would have disrupted the ground, or he would have pulled some sort of mental trick, or something or other. It's very Steve Englehart, in the Old West, of all places, literally a gunfight at the OK Corral, 1 man against 1 man. And Thor can't lose. It's not like he can lose in that encounter. So I remember being struck by it. I loved it. And there are all of other great moments in here, but I love that moment, so I was happy to get this as a remainder and just have it so I don't have to worry about the condition of my paperbacks. And then I got another hardcover on New Comic Book Day, something that is not brand new, and yet I had no idea that it existed. This is the DC universe of Mike Mignola. That is Batman on the cover and Deadman on the back. And Mike Mignola, again, I don't know why I'm explaining this because you're a comic book fan, so you wouldn't be watching this video. But Mike Mignola is a fan favorite writer and artist who, before he was a writer-artist, before he was an auteur, in other words, before he created his signature character, Hellboy, who's gone on to be in movies and cartoons and whatnot. And I think the Hellboy franchise is being rebooted. Or maybe has already been rebooted, one way or another. Before he made Hellboy and put himself on another level, he was a working artist for DC, and he was in a bunch of issues. Whenever you had an issue to draw, he would be up in line to freelance it. And this volume collects all of those. I had no idea that it existed. So this has the World of Krypton, a miniseries about the ancient days of Superman's home planet that Mike Mignola drew. It has a 4-part miniseries about the Phantom Stranger, a DC character I've always loved because he's not explained. We don't know who or what he is and what he can and cannot do. He's just resolutely that way, and I have always liked that. And a bunch of other stuff, including Batman, a character that Mike Mignola was made to draw. Mike Mignola's DC work is most famous for 2 things. A 4-part miniseries called Cosmic Odyssey that has some terrific moments in it, and a Batman one-shot, an alternate reality Batman called Gotham by Gaslight, in which Batman takes place in the 19th century instead of the 20th century. And neither of those is in here, of course, because those are separate properties. DC can sell them separately. But this is everything else. This is everything else that Mike Mignola did, and that's great. That's fantastic. It also has a gallery in the back of all of his covers. So I was, again, happy to get this out of the comic shop. And then, even though I don't buy single-issue comics, I had to get this one. This is Astro City number 50. It is not 50 issues of Astro City. It's 50 issues that Astro City has done with Vertigo. Astro City started, this is actually around 105 or 110 issues of Astro City. It's by Kurt Busiek, and it's his homage to superhero comics. Astro City is a city in this reality that he's thought up that is heavily populated with superheroes and supervillains. And all of them are homages of one kind or another to the great heroes of Marvel or DC or Fawcett, with a lot of inventiveness mixed in, a lot of stuff that Busiek has just thought up on his own. And it's amazing. Astro City is always amazing. It's just terrific. The way he uses these very obvious homages to the characters that he loved from his youth and tells great, resonant, new stories about them without needing to worry about copyright of any kind. He just made the world up himself. I was skeptical at first, but I was won over by like issue 1 or 2. And I've been a loyal Astro City fan ever since because they're so great. They're so great, so touching and so funny and such high adventure. With, outsized heroes and villains fighting each other left, right, and center. And I was following along that whole time, and buying the individual issues. And years ago, after a great plot line in which there's a character in Kurt Busiek's Astro City reality who's very similar to Batman. He seems very similar to Batman, and in that great run, he's revealed to be a vampire. And that's why he has Batman-like abilities. It was sort of a riff on the fact that most of the DC universe thinks Batman is a vampire. That most of the DC universe has no idea he's just a human in a costume. They don't understand how he could be so effective if he didn't have superpowers. And that storyline wrapped up, and I loved it. And then there was a backup feature. Just 8 pages. A backup feature. Years and years ago. Called The Nearness of You. In which a young man remembers his wife. Now, this is a comic book reality, much like Marvel, much like DC, where huge events happen all the time. Reality is reset, supervillains knock down buildings, people lose their lives, people get their minds taken over, all that stuff. Only this story tells it from the viewpoint of an ordinary person, and not an ordinary person who's had anything done to him. It's that during one of those reality remakes, when mystical characters realigned a reality that had been disrupted by a supervillain, the realignment wasn't perfect. And one of the things that wasn't right is that this young man lost the wife he adored. No one remembered her except him. The reality didn't fit exactly. So she was gone and had never been, but he still remembered her. Everything about her, the way she smiled, the way she laughed. And none of his friends remembered her, and he would constantly call them and ask them until finally they got sick of it. They thought he was either crazy or a crank. And it was ruining his life. It was driving him insane. And until one of the mystical characters in the Astro City universe takes pity on him and allows him to remember her. And so she's not just a figure from dreams anymore. He has all of his memories of her. And it was a little story called The Nearness of You, and it was unbelievably touching. Just unbelievably touching. And then the Astro City just roared on all the action and adventure and pathos and whatnot. And fans never forgot it. I never forgot it. You knew as soon as you read it that you'd read something really special. And for their 50th issue, they decided to return to that character. And so we see, when this issue starts, we see him, he has created a support group for people whose lives have been affected by superheroes or supervillains. And he's older, and he doesn't look quite like the character in The Nearness of You, so we're watching him set up, have these meetings with all these people, and we're thinking, all right, so time has passed. Is this the same guy? Do we really... is this resonating at all? And we follow him through his normal day. He talks to people. He counsels them. He goes home. He has dinner. He pours himself a glass of wine. He sits in front of his easel to work on painting. And the next page hits you like a gut punch because it's the artwork from The Nearness of You. It's his beloved from The Nearness of You. It's that panel, that painting is a panel from the original 8-page comic. I was verklempt right there on the subway platform. So this is a 3-part thing I will certainly buy. I will go into a comic book shop and I will buy the other 2 parts of this just to see what the author does with it. And there you go. That is a new comic book day. 2 old comics and a single issue. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. I think this may be all the videos for today because as you're going to see coming, it's an old song. I had a deadline creep up on me. That's why I'm talking so fast in all these videos. If I can manage to get it under control, I'll be back. But otherwise, that'll be it. I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.